My name is Kathy Palmer. I am the Executive Director for TTRA, and it is my pleasure today to introduce Paul McLeod, Director of Analytics, and Aaron Neeson, Director of Digital Strategy from Simpleview. It's been a long year for everyone due to COVID, and many DMOs are planning for the new year as COVID cases continue to grow. Simpleview is a software, data analytics, and insights company, and they're here to talk to you about what to expect in 2021. They will introduce their data dashboard for you and reference for you as you plan for 2021.
Cool. All right. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Aaron Nissen. I'm joined here by Paul McLeod, Director of Analytics. And today, we just wanted to walk you guys through some of the data that we're seeing, start talking and looking ahead to 2021, offer some practical tips and suggestions for destinations as they start to roll out strategies and plan for next year. And then lastly, Paul's going to showcase a lot of the data in the dashboard that is available to you, destinations currently. We wanted to make sure we get that into your hands as you're starting to plan out the new year. As a company, Simpleview is a software, data, analytics, and insight company that works with destinations, their agencies to promote leisure travel, group travel, and win bids for conventions and events. So today, I'm sure we've all been on many webinars looking at planning ahead for 2021 and trying to predict the future. We're currently just working on our core strategies for the next year with our partners, but we wanted to give a hint at some of the things that we're seeing that will influence 2021. So the first thing that we're seeing is that we are unfortunately going through a COVID case spike. This is happening across the US and to varying different degrees. But as you can see here, what we've done is graph out the COVID cases just to assess the situation. And we've overlaid that with some of the TSA throughput data. So this data is all available on our Insights hub. But what we're seeing, unfortunately, is this spike in cases. That's starting to have an impact on how travelers are planning in the Q1 year for travel. Unfortunately, the top three reasons for or factors preventing visitors from taking a trip are really about they're concerned about spreading the virus or contracting the virus with 60% there. Others are also concerned about travel restrictions and destinations that they're planning for or looking at. And 42% of consumers are unsure of health and safety protocols. So with the rise in COVID cases, you can see these three factors are further going to be preventing consumers from taking trips early in the new year. The good news, though, is that there is that vaccine that's been announced, and hopefully it's looking like middle of the year will be widely distributed, but this is obviously a sliding, adjusting topic, and there's going to be quite a bit of information released over the next few months. So there's starting with some negative signs. There is a lot of room for positivity as we enter the new year. Based on some of the data and the research from our friends and partners at Destination Analysts, we're seeing that consumers are a lot more optimistic to travel once the vaccine is widely distributed, with about 60% of travelers believing that life will return to normal with a vaccine. 44% of travelers are looking to take a major vacation once the vaccine is announced. So that's very positive, and all signs are looking good once the vaccine is announced. And unfortunately, the vaccine's a little bit murky right now in terms of who's going to get it, when's it officially going to be out. So that's something we're still continuing to monitor as we plan out our strategy and data for next year. So what we're anticipating right now, and again, we're still just fine-tuning this planning, but sharing with you some of our initial thoughts, is that as we pass the holiday season and move into Q1, it looks like we're going to have reduced travel just due to the COVID increases. We saw a pretty good increase over Thanksgiving. We're likely to see another increase during Christmas as people go home and want to spend time with loved ones, family, friends, etc. However, the trend line of COVID is still scaling quite high. So we are expecting a reduced travel schedule for the first quarter to start with, However, there's still that practical local drive market trip that many of us are taking, weekend getaways, outdoor activities. So that still seems to be the sweet spot for many destinations in terms of promoting travel. Now, the other thing that we want to keep an eye on is news of the vaccine. Obviously, there's been a lot of hype about that. Consumer interest is, quite keen to travel once the vaccine's available, but it's still not quite clear in terms of that picture. So that's something to really keep an eye on Q1, because as the year unfolds, we'll start to get a better sense of the direct timing of when travel may return. So as looking into Q2 of next year, we are expecting travel to start picking up. We'll be getting into the spring, summer months, and hopefully by that point, the vaccine have been, distributed or become more widely available, and consumers will feel a little more confident traveling. Um, for many destinations, that is the time that we recommend starting to roll out your campaigns in anticipation of a summer travel season. For most destinations, summer is the typically busier season for travel, with summer holidays from school and whatnot. So that's something to look forward to in terms of Q2, that June, July timeline, which also early estimates, coincide with the news of the vaccine being distributed. So that's Q2 in terms of planning, get rolling your campaigns out. And then Q3, we are expecting a pretty healthy travel season. There is quite a bit of pent up travel demand, people just looking to finally get out and take a major vacation. So all signs are pointing to a strong summer. So as destinations, we would advise to start, planning for that, although it may change quite a bit significantly, before that Q3. But all signs at this point are looking towards a strong summer travel season. So that means, ramping up your paid campaigns, generating awareness, getting back into market with your core audiences, et cetera, to be timely and relevant. So that's kind of the early forensics of what we're seeing going into next year. But what I wanted to do today was just give an oversight of what we're seeing, and then really have Paul walk you through some of the data and the dashboards that we have available. So what we have done at Simpleview is create several insights hubs with various data points to help you destination marketers planning, understanding the situation, the impact on your business, and to make informed decisions. So this is all available publicly on simpleviewinc.com/insights hub. On that Insight Hub, you have access to a lot of the leisure data that Paul's going to be walking you through, as well as we pull meetings and sales data from our partners with CRM data, and we have a lot of information forecasting the room nights, what's happening in the state of the meeting sector, and again, all of this information is publicly available on our Insights Hub for you to use. The other area, if you are a Simpleview partner, is on our client portal. When you log in, again, all of this data in more detail is available to you, from web traffic, paid media traffic, lodging trends, air travel. All this information is easily accessible for you there. So if you have a chance, when you log into the client portal, you should be able to access all this. If not, just notify your account manager and we'll be able to help you out with that. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Paul McLeod, who's going to walk us through some of the detailed COVID data that we're seeing, and talk a little bit about the trends of what we're seeing.
Thanks, Aaron. That's a good overview of what we've been doing. And yeah, now we just want to sort of use these tools to talk a little bit about just, I thought you put it well in terms of your expected schedule of people getting back into traveling. And I think we can look at how the data that's in our industry averages and our client portal helps support that notion. So yeah, first of all, like you mentioned, we have the TSA traveler throughput, which, as I don't think anybody's surprised, this is everybody just going through a TSA checkpoint. So it's a pretty accurate view of passengers, and I guess probably airport and aircraft personnel as well. But obviously, it's going to give us a pretty good look at how many people are going on a journey. each day. And you can see the gap has narrowed quite a bit since April, but obviously we're not even halfway back to where we would want to be. I do think it's interesting that when you look at this, you can see the same sort of big spikes and swings that were associated with holidays last year show up in the data again this year. So particularly around Thanksgiving, you can see it spikes really high. I think that's the busiest travel day of the year is that Wednesday before Thanksgiving. At least it used to be that people said that when I was growing up. While obviously it was not that busy, relatively speaking, this year, it is good to see that, or I don't know if good is the right answer, but it's encouraging about the possibility that people are doing leisure travel to see that the holiday is still having an impact on the levels that we can see that there is, in fact, holiday travel essentially going on. So it'll be really interesting to watch how that goes with Christmas and New Year's coming up. I know my parents are traveling to see me during that period, although they'll be driving, so they won't help these stats. So yeah, that tells us something about where we are at in terms of like actual today travel, which is way below where we would expect to be, absent global pandemic. So now we're going to turn more to some of the proprietary industry averages and aggregates that we can put together, which come from our view into 230, and actually it's going to shortly be 259 North American destination marketing organization sites, which should they just help us get an idea of, specifically for DMOs, what should you be doing? Because I think DMO web traffic is a pretty good indicator of whether the audience for DMOs is engaged, what they're looking at, whether they can be reached, and that sort of thing. All the studies I've ever seen on where DMO sites fit into the travel booking funnel is that they're pretty early on, months ahead of actual arrival, is when you're going to be probably, for most DMO content, it depends on what kind of page you're on, spending time on the site. So if we are seeing activity now, that's going to be telling us something about perhaps what the real travel trends, the real TSA traveler throughput will be 2 to 4 months from now. So that makes it nice as a thing to analyze. So let me scoot my mouse over to this screen. There we go. So yeah, what we're seeing with the sessions that we track in our industry averages is that obviously there was, again, a huge gap in April and May as the whole country shut down, and everybody pretty much stopped travel planning. We have other stats that back this up. Hotel booking searches on our booking engine, or referral engine I should say, went way down. And the average length of time before people were planning to travel on those booking searches went way up. So everybody shifted into longer term travel planning mode. But since then, as you can see, as you go further right on this graph of the blue line being 2020 sessions and the 2019 being, the yellow line being 2019 sessions, is that, the gap narrowed through the fall, and then it's been pretty stagnant since then. Maybe opened up a little bit at times during November before going back close to what it was. When we break it down by channels, we can get a little bit more insight into where this is coming from. So this is just showing year-over-year growth, basically the same view as we had on the previous chart, except combined into one percentage growth number. So if we're below 0, that means we've got fewer sessions than last year on that day. And that's true for most days, obviously, since the pandemic began. But you can see, we've leveled off in the 10 to 20% off of last year's pace range for the yellow organic search line, which I think is probably the purest indicator of what is, what is the traveler interest in a DMO site right now, because that's just driven by what people are putting into search engines and clicking through to find on DMO sites. It's pretty stable source of traffic compared to something like paid search, which you can see jumps up and down as DMOs devote more and less budget to it. But you can see that, early in the pandemic, everybody shut off their paid campaigns, probably pretty sensible. Not a whole lot of point at that time in going after exposure, excuse me, to relevant audiences. And other campaigns were probably dropped as well. So, the blue line here incorporates all sessions. We don't have specific lines here for like email or social or other forms of paid outreach, or at least, of outbound marketing. Um, so that's probably why you see the blue line for all sessions really dropping below organic sessions there for a while. But then as people have turned those back on a little bit, all sessions and organic sessions have converged, and they're actually really close in terms of overall growth. And the other thing I think that's important to note here is that, for a few months now, we've been, between, like I said, 10 and 20% down off of last year's pace. So that's like off. It's not good. We hate reporting a number like that when we're doing an SEO engagement for somebody, but it also is 80 to 90% of the people are still there, still looking at DMO websites. So that to me suggests that people are definitely still interested, at least in travel in the future. Even if they keep having to postpone their plans, they're still thinking about them all the time. Another thing we do with this database that I think is really cool is we break it down by how far away from the destination website the user is when they visit it. So what that means is that we collect not just the sessions for each website each day, but we also collect the geographical location of all the users doing those sessions. And then we break it down into locals, which is basically an attempt to try to get people who are within an hour's drive of the destination that they're looking at. Drive markets are those between 1 and 4 hours of driving away. And then we figure if you're more than 4 hours, you're probably flying. So we put those in the blue line there. And again, here we see a real difference in how these different groups behave throughout the pandemic. Locals fall off badly. Everybody falls off immediately, but locals don't recover the way the other two segments do, to where, drive markets have really been running, close to even, maybe 5% down if you smooth out all those jaggies for most of the summer. So, basically, if you had a campaign before that was targeting drive market users, they were still there. Fly market, somewhat worse, although lately they've converged. And then the locals were really far down. You'll also notice that the locals and the drive market to a certain extent spike around July 4th, which, or that at least they have the biggest spike then. That has to do with the fact that events are a huge deal, and July 4th is historically the #1 DMO day for traffic, at least in the US every year, by far, as people just check out like the fireworks event detail. And that gives you a hint as to why the local line is so much lower, and it's because locals are typically coming to DMO websites for event information. And obviously, throughout this year, a lot of DMOs have been running without any events going on at all. Some people we know even took down their calendar pages entirely, although we don't recommend that. It's better to just tell people that there are no events there. And yeah, so what we see with those yellows coming back is that I think there are probably, people have figured out more and more ways to do socially distanced events that can go into an events calendar. 2, I think around the holidays, there are events that are just going to happen no matter what, the pandemic or no. So that's an interesting trend to watch, is those locals coming back, and the content that they support, as we'll see, also rising as a result. Yeah, it's just a really interesting breakdown that we find really useful for trying to figure out not just how many people are coming to visit the site, but what kind of audience is it if we know where they're from. Another thing that's cool with these tools that we have is we also assign a region to each destination. These are very basic. They're based on Destinations International definitions, I believe. So there are 4 continental US regions: Northeast, Southeast, Midwest, and West. When we break those down, again, we find different patterns across all of them. So here we're looking at that same local drive fly breakdown we had on the previous slide, except now we're focusing just on the Northeast of the US. And the interesting thing here, I think, we're looking at organic sessions still, as it says on the slide. The interesting thing here is how much higher drive was for them than the other ones. We saw overall drive is doing better than fly, but not by a ton. But here in the Northeast, drive markets were by far the thing growing, particularly in the summer, as those places became, in like May, the Northeast, including New York City, was the real hotspot in the country of coronavirus cases. but that's fallen off. That fell off starting in June, July. And you saw that the drive market interest really rose as people, who had been in pretty severe quarantines in a lot of those places, looked for the opportunity to do a quick trip away. And Aaron definitely mentioned some of this. And then you can see the locals were coming back on the 4th of July and then Labor Day. But by and large, despite some retreat of the strength of the drive markets in the most recent weeks, drive markets were really huge for the Northeast all year. If we compare that to the Midwest, though, we see it's a totally different story. All the different market segments are down about equally for the Midwest all year. Locals lower than all of them for certain periods, again, as we would expect with the lack of events for people to look up information on. But the drive market was just not there to help sustain any outreach efforts. So that really suggests the importance of understanding not just what's going on with the country or with the industry as a whole, but with what's going on specifically in your market. And we find that, coronavirus rates really drive this kind of thing. And also, to some extent, as the, not to get too political here, but as the response to coronavirus got somewhat politicized in this country, you might see different regions of the country or different particular destinations suffering or thriving more depending on the just sort of the demographic they're going after with their destination. So, with this difference in particular, the drive markets for the different for the different regions of the country, we can see that the paid search response by the different regions has kind of matched that. In particular, note the light blue line for the Northeast. They had that drive market to reach out to pretty strongly all summer. And they, compared to their 2020 levels, were actually running above even on daily paid search spend for most of the summer. Meanwhile, the Midwest, the yellow line, they, did run plenty of paid search during the year. I think you see there a lot of people possibly had some budgets turned off during the spring and early summer that they had to spend by the end of the year. So they turned them all on in the fall. But also, generally they've just been below the Northeast in terms of their paid search spend, which is probably wise with fewer opportunities out there. So these are all just the kinds of things that it's nice to be able to analyze and understand the trends of for specific DMOs and markets with these kinds of tools. Another thing we just recently launched that we haven't really been able to push out to too many people yet in terms of promoting it is we've started collecting data on what kinds of pages people are going to on DMO sites. So here we're still dealing with Google Analytics data from DMO websites, the same, or not the same, but a pretty similar set of websites in this database. And what I've got here for you is the organic search entrances by topic to each of these subjects that you see at the top of the chart there. So things to do pages, like on most DMO sites, those are /things, -to, -do. But whatever the main things to do type page is, if you call yours attractions, we still included it or whatever. So things to do, the homepage, obviously. Events are the one that's really interesting for the way the pandemic has gone. COVID pages, you can see make a big impact on DMO website traffic in there. And then just about equally interesting are outdoors and hotels, though they're lower on this chart. And then restaurants, of course, and lastly, meetings. So lots of interesting trends here that you can see, including, for instance, things to do pages are typically among the most popular on DMO sites. Although, as you can see, pre-pandemic, events are sometimes more popular than them. But once the pandemic hits, that all changes. Things to do, suffers, but is relatively okay compared to the other ones. Whereas events just falls down, and not until late summer and fall does it start to rise back up, though this is nowhere near where it would normally be. Again, these numbers, by the way, are expressing a percentage of all entrances to all page types. So as one goes down, the others will go up. You see COVID pages were, for a period, the most popular on DMO sites and have pretty much fell down as everybody got a little bit more comfortable with things throughout the fall, and then spiked again in mid-November as the coronavirus rates in the country started to really climb up. The last one I'll point out on this particular chart is the light gray silver line for meetings, which typically, the meetings pages were running about even with hotels, restaurants, and even outdoors in terms of entrances, but have fallen way behind them in the coronavirus era and not gotten picked back up yet, which is, not too surprising to know. Here we're looking at the same basic information, except expressed a different way. Now we're expressing each one of these categories in terms of its year-over-year growth in organic search page views. So if you're above 0, that means you've got more page views in that subject than last year. And if you're below, that means you've got fewer on that day. So, a number of topics have done actually better than they did last year. Outdoors, no shocker at all. This is nice to see, just because it would be shocking if it weren't this way. But outdoors, well ahead of last year's pace in terms of pages than it used to be in 2020. So, and that's continued pretty much all year. So, overall absolute page views have fallen throughout the fall, but in terms of their growth over last year, stayed strongly above those numbers. By the way, if you see that weird dip towards the beginning of November, that was election week in the US. So that's why you're seeing that right there. Anyway, the other one, this is the one that surprised me, is that hotels pages were doing so much better than they did a year ago. To be fully honest, I don't have a great story for why that is, but across the industry, we saw more people visiting hotels pages this summer than did a year ago. Perhaps just related to more sort of wishful planning, or maybe some other places where people normally go for hotels information were shut down or weren't as accessible, and so people turned to DMOs instead. It bears further investigation, but definitely an interesting phenomenon. Meanwhile, restaurants did pretty well, as people, I think, kept probably looking for information on which ones were doing takeout and which ones were even open. Then the other interesting things to me are, events has been down like 60 to 70% all year. It's not changed, or not events, sorry, I meant to say meetings, has been down 60 or 7% all year and has not really changed at all during that period. And really until, I think events or meetings will be the last thing to come back once we have a vaccine, just because most people, view them as sort of an optional activity that can be, they're also pretty bad in terms of potential to spread infections. So once we have the vaccine, those should come roaring back. Lots of people will be very eager to get them done, but it's going to take actual progress towards a real herd immunity or vaccine situation, I think, to bring that industry back. Whereas events, which is what I should, which is not what I was talking about before, the yellow line, we do see it starting to creep up. It's that content hurt the worst, and it's still hurting worse than any other leisure topic. But it is creeping up, and particularly in the last week or two, it's rising every day. So that will be really interesting to watch going forward. Is with the holidays, how high does it get in terms of year-over-year growth for events, and is that sustained after the holidays? Because typically, the holidays bring in a lot of people for that information. So this is all cool for getting an overview of the entire industry, and that's great. But there's even a step further we could go by allowing you to compare your site directly to these figures. And for that, we have actually built a little tool that we can set up for anybody who is to whose site we have Google Analytics access. So we've got a little sort of mini dashboard thing that we show for people. It's got about 8 different charts in it that compare you versus the industry versus your region, and then a comparison set that we can set up with you. We obviously require about a half dozen people in a comparison set to protect data privacy. But this is something that we are willing to do for just about any DMO, at least in North America, that is willing to share their data with us. So, in this case, you can see this client is outperforming their comp set a little bit. You can see the yellow line is, generally a little bit ahead of the red line for the comp set, but lagging their region, the green line, for most of the year. So that should help them. That's the kind of thing that can really help you make the case about whether you're doing your job or whether things are worse in your area, and so on and so forth. With these charts, you can also switch up the metrics and look at just, one of these lines. Here we're looking at just their comp set and comparing their organic search sessions to paid search sessions to all sessions. So you can get an idea of your comp set, what their channel mix is for their website right now, which again can be really helpful for understanding where you need to optimize and or turn off or on your campaigns. Just getting an idea of what the other people in your area are doing, where, coronavirus rates will tend to be geographically correlated. So that might be really useful intelligence for you to have. We can also do the local drive fly breakdown for your site with these tools that I mentioned before, where we show how far away from your destination your users are. This is not a breakdown that's available natively in Google Analytics. You can't look this up anywhere in there. You have to download the data and process it to get this. So this is another reason we want to put this tool out there so people can get into that and get an idea of what their audiences are. So here, this client, you can see their drive markets were doing great before the pandemic and have never really rebounded since the pandemic started. Meanwhile, their fly sessions are actually, they're strongest for most of the year, and lately are way above last year's numbers. So they do potentially have some opportunity there that can be revealed with this kind of a breakdown. And then we put the content topic breakdowns in there as well. So here we are looking at the events pages for this client, their region, the industry, and their comp set. And you can see, they've actually been outperforming all these other groups for their events pages throughout the year. And then again, very recently, they're actually even outperforming themselves from a year ago. Another interesting way, this is not really the trend that we saw for the industry as a whole, but for particular clients, you might have a different thing. And so it's really great to be able to share this information with people about their own sites through these tools. And then lastly, we give you the opportunity to look at your year-over-year growth by topic on your website. So here we can see, this client doing great with things to do, restaurants, even lately events, but other topics not as much. Actually, they were doing great on outdoors too, but I had to turn it off because it was like 10,000% growth, which ruined the view of all the other subjects. But again, really hard to get this kind of view in Google Analytics. You'd have to do a bunch of custom queries to do it. So we think this tool is really cool. We think it can help DMOs do a lot to plan and coordinate their campaigns and figure out where their opportunities are, and then get buy-in from stakeholders on the work that they're doing. So if you are interested, please, we would love to set this up for you. You don't have to be a Simpleview client for anything. You just have to follow these two steps you see at the top there. Add simpleviewinc@gmail.com to your GA account with read and analyze privileges, and then send an email to seo@simpleviewinc.com to alert us, let us know about it, and request the configuration of your dashboard, and we will get back to you. And it's great because it's not just, you won't just get a flat report, you'll get a dashboard that updates every day in the morning with this information. So that was a lot. I love talking about lines, but now I'm done, and I'm going to hand it back to Aaron to conclude with a summary.
Awesome. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, as discussed to everybody online here, we really just wanted to showcase this tool to you guys and make sure that you're aware that this data exists for you. We've got it in two flavors. You can go to our corporate website, Simpleview Inc. You have insights and hub information there, including the leisure side as well as meeting sales, which we didn't really cover too much here, but that data does exist, and we're pulling that from, again, hundreds of clients based on room nights, bookings, etc., like that. If you are a Simpleview client, you can access this data and more data on our client portal site. Paul, yeah,
sorry, I know.
So there's two ways publicly. Anybody can access this, and then on the client portal as well. These are just tools that we felt were really timely to share with you as, we're going through quite a wave of what is happening. There's, that mix of optimism and, I think everybody's excited for, potential travel season with the news of the vaccine, but we're also going through a massive spike. So, it's going to be a little bit rocky over the next few months, but now is the time to start planning. And that's why we want to get these tools to you. If you, contact us, as Paul mentioned there, we can run your website through there so you can benchmark and start to compare yourself to competitive sets, which is, I think, really vital for understanding, travel recovery and how you're doing in comparison to other destinations. So a couple just quick takeaways. We didn't want to get the crystal ball out and try to make any, bold predictions, because there's still a lot of uncertainty happening over the next few weeks through as we get into Christmas holidays. We're still seeing, quite a bit of uptick in COVID cases. California has been announcing restrictions. So we think it's going to get worse before it gets better, but there is that optimism for Q3. So just a couple practical takeaways. There's still the market for your drive market. Continue to focus there, put content out, make sure you're updating, socially distant activities, winter outdoor activities. That's the type of content that is really resonating. As Paul showed you guys, things to do is one of the other main areas to focus on. Just making sure that content is timely, updated, and out there. Looking at the COVID related information, there's a lot of changing. If you are in California or the West Coast, there's now travel restrictions, lockdowns, etc., like that. So it's going to be really imperative that we continue to update, with what's happening in your destination, businesses that are open, that are closed, travel restrictions, and yet any other information that may impact the visitor's trip to your destination. So, as we look ahead to the future, don't forget these fundamentals that are still critical as we enter Q1 of next year. When we take a look at this time, it's, budgets are going to be cut, or probably have been cut for many of you, as well as layoffs and furloughs. Now is a good time to just reevaluate your marketing KPIs. How are you measuring success? And what are your goals for going into the new year with your marketing initiatives and campaigns? And I do urge you to look beyond things such as impressions and reach. For many destinations, we're now have had to get a lot closer to our industry, provide leadership to them, and show new ways of providing value to your stakeholders. And so how are we better measuring success beyond, marketing metrics like impressions and reach? Are you able to measure referrals to partners, or economic impact, or arrivals, and geolocation data? There's many other ways you can be evaluating success. And so if you haven't done that, now is a good time to start planning for that as we as all signs start to show a bit of a travel recovery this year. And then lastly, as we look at when travel is expected, that summer travel, we saw a pretty big increase in travel this summer for many of us. Well, big increase due to COVID, under COVID comparison times. But we're expecting that summer travel to be kind of a big travel season. Again, it's coming up on a year. There's a lot of pent up travel demand. People just want to get out. They're concerned about safety. And with the vaccine on the horizon, all signs are pointing to that summer travel season. So start planning your activities and your investments around that. And obviously keep up to date with, what's happening with the vaccine, COVID cases, everything else, because it is, quite a fluid situation. And one of the things that I wanted to mention from some of the data that Paul showed was, we're seeing a real sporadic paid search and paid media investments from different destinations. We are expecting many destinations are going to be ramping that up to start, generating awareness and then moving lower into the funnel as the year, continues. So using the dashboard that Paul shared, it's a good way for you to, evaluate, check on some of your competitive destinations, see what's happening there, just so you're not left behind, because we're expecting this, marketing tourism wave to kind of all of a sudden hit, and, really DMOs are going to start taking off as signs start to show a clear recovery. So we just want to make sure that you have that information so you can be, investing in getting your marketing turned back on at the right time. So that's just a little bit of some of our overview. We're going to be releasing a quarterly one kind of a assessment shortly in the new year. We just want to give you a sneak peek of some of that and make sure that you're aware that the state is available to you publicly and you can access it as we shared. So with that, I think we'll take some time for any questions that came up. But otherwise, thank you very much, and we'll start answering questions.
There are a couple questions in the chat. The
Cool.
first one says, what are the KPAs and KPIs of a successful DMO, key performance areas, and key performance indicators?
Ooh, that's a big topic. So I'd love to, whoever asked that, you can follow up with me directly and I'm happy to answer in more detail. But at a high level, I think the big trend to look at is starting to move away from looking at your marketing in isolation of each other. Oftentimes we see agencies deliver a report that says, here's your Facebook report, or here's your other ad network report, and they're all very siloed. We're now moving to omni-channel marketing, where you need to be looking at the totality of your campaigns and how they're working with each other. Are you targeting similar audiences across multiple channels? If you're running, Facebook ads and display ads, are you seeing increased performance in the same marketplace, and how those ad sets work together? So just really paying attention to not just channel by channel, but how they stitch together seamlessly. But then more importantly, and a really easy one that most destinations should be doing, is how are your ads driving traffic to your website? And then of that ad traffic, what are they doing on your website? One of the things that we see quite frequently is, you get a high bounce rate from Facebook ads. For example, typically it's about 85 to 90%, give or take. But if you're getting anything higher than that from a bounce rate, you might not be targeting the right audiences. So by looking at how your media investments work with your other channels, whether it be your website or mobile apps or whatever it may be, you can start to get a clearer picture of true performance. One of the things that we've done quite a bit this year with our partners is looking at how paid media traffic is driving through to hotel referrals or hotel bookings on websites of our partners. Some have booking engines, some have referral engines, and some just rely on travel leads. So those are all little things that you can be doing, is to connect your website with your media spend to see that whole throughput. One of the reasons we've been doing that is now destinations are a little bit more accountable to their hoteliers and their stakeholders to show value. And when we can put an economic dollar on how much a referral to a hotel partner is, that starts to get into return on ad spend, which is a little bit more qualified than reach and impressions. So just moving towards blended metrics, trying to connect the dots, and not just rely on those old numbers of reach and impressions, because they're important. They're indicators of how who you're reaching and how your ads are working, but it doesn't really show intent to travel. Whereas a website visit has more intent to travel, and then a hotel partner or restaurant referral, even more intent to travel. So we just need to kind of think through that path to purchase funnel. So hopefully that was just a glimpse insights into some of the KPIs. I can get very technical on that, but feel free to reach out to me and I can definitely answer that in more detail.
There was one more question. It says, what are the distance definitions for local, drive, and fly? It may have been mentioned, but this person missed it. And then what do you see local being important post-pandemic?
You were cutting out a little bit on that, the second part. What was that?
What do you see local being important post-pandemic?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So the definitions, right now we're using a straight line geographical distance, like what is the difference between these 2 points on the globe? And we use, it actually says in the charts, and now I can't remember. Anyway, I'll be there in 2 seconds to tell you. I think
it was 200 miles for fly.
Yeah. Whoops, that's not the right one.
But I'll answer.
Okay, yeah, it's two. Yeah, if you're closer than 50 miles in straight line distance, again, you're local. 50 to 200 is drive, and fly is 200 miles. Again, we're trying to get about an hour of driving distance and 4 hours of driving distance as the breakpoints there. If you're 50 miles, that probably is something like an hour worth of driving at best, right at 50. And 200 miles, again, you're probably 250 plus miles around away in terms of actual driving distance. So it's starting to get there. We do have plans to try to use some other services to do actual driving distance in time, which would be even cooler.
I'll tackle that last piece, Paul, in terms of the question of local being important post-pandemic.
Yeah.
Yes, that
Yeah.
what we're as you know, people are feeling safer returning to travel. There's going to be pent-up demand for friends, family, catching up with loved ones. You know, you may not have caught up with them over the holidays, so that'll probably be one of the first areas that kind of starts to recover, which is the VFR market. So locals, in many respects, are more likely to invite friends and relatives. So, you know, you could be running campaigns targeting locals, suggesting, hey, you know, invite your loved ones to come visit and reconnect. But there's also, you know, the local little trips, you know, quick little getaways. So if you're a larger region, that's going to be more relevant than if you're maybe a municipality or city. So I think local has a lot of value, particularly in the VFR market, as people try to connect with friends and relatives that way. The other thing to keep tabs on, which is in our Insights Hub, is, you know, airline travel. We're tracking the TSA outputs and throughputs, and as you start to see that return to normal, I would say your reliance on local traffic will probably diminish a little bit. So until you start to see those numbers recovering, I would say local is still going to be a pretty important market, particularly with that VFR aspect.
Yeah, it should be noted for this database's purposes that these definitions are derived from where you are when you visit the site, not where you live. So it's always actually been ambiguous to me with that local traffic, whether it is people who live in your destination, actual locals, or people who are visiting, who are just in market already and have already traveled. So particularly with their affinity for events, it could be either one. You know, locals do seem to use DMO websites as a resource for that kind of information, which is great. Yeah, I mean, so I think to some extent with that, locals are a less important demographic for DMOs in the sense that whether they are residents or travelers who are already there, they are not people that you are going to be influencing into a future trip. But there is still much to be said for just being sort of a good concierge as a DMO. That's what DMOs kind of were historically, you know, particularly with visitor centers. You know, that's people who are already there. You can't talk them into coming at that point, but it's a really useful service. So I think that the local audience for on DMO sites is probably people where you're just trying to make their experience in the destination, again, for whatever reason they're there, more pleasant, and it can certainly help with the brand of your destination and everything, and which is not to contradict anything Aaron said about reaching out. I think that is absolutely going to be a huge way to increase travel to your destination. But it is good to keep in mind, you know, what we're looking at with this stat here.
And just to add, you know, and this is, you know, an opinion, because you know, the data is a little bit murky, but there's also speculation that due to the, you know, pandemic, there's going to be some economic hardships for some, and so that will change travel patterns of folks. So the, you know, more affluent shouldn't see much of a change. They're more likely to get on their flight, fly to, you know, the Bahamas or an island or whatever like that. Whereas, you know, some of the lower income families may not be able to take those big, you know, major Disneyland trips type things. So they'll be looking for more smaller trips, more localized trips, unique experiences. So it's too early to really predict that, but there is definitely going to be a shakeup in terms of different audiences. And so in terms of, you know, thinking ahead, really segmentation is going to play a major role this year as we look to meet the different needs of different travelers based on, you know, their economic situation and, you know, the global, you know, health and safety of everybody. So I think we're in for, you know, a lot of continuous change. It's going to be a lot different than previous years, which creates opportunity in smaller niches as budgets are reduced. So I think, you know, we'll continue to report back on, you know, our speculation each quarter, starting with Q1. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting time for travel this year. And I think there's going to be a lot of opportunity. It'll just be a lot different than previous years.
Yep.
Well, I think that's it for the questions. So thank you so much, Paul and Aaron, for the great presentation this afternoon. The presentation is being recorded and will be available by the end of the week. And we'll also be sending out a very short survey to all the participants. So thank you very much. We appreciate it for your talking today. Thank you.
Thanks,
Absolutely.
everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.